allowed me to retire at 52.
You're listening to the BulkLoads podcast, your number one resource for everything bulk freight trucking. And this is episode 230.
Hey guys, Jared Flynn with the BulkLoads podcast. Got Tyler in here with me.
What's going on?
Tyler, I'll let you kick off the tip.
Yeah, so the tip this week, we have been going full speed on our bulk TMS.
Yes.
All the guys over there, Caleb, Austin, I mean, they're all going full speed on this thing. We have some exciting new changes coming, and one of the changes has to do with just the overall look of the TMS, which I'm excited for. We'll also be shooting an email out to our TMS users, but one of the changes is we are changing the menu actually on the homepage. It's for a number of reasons, but mainly just overall cleanliness and just to make it more modern. And so to make it easier, because that's what we're all about, it's just, making it all easy, accessible for these guys to use. But we also have invoicing being added, which is a huge one that everyone was looking out for.
Yeah. If you don't know what TMS is, it's transportation management software. But if you're out there as an owner-operator, fleet, dispatcher, brokerage, small shipping company, we have developed a product or software that is so simple to use. My 8-year-old could use it, but this system is a one-fits-all, a start-to-finish process in everything that you're doing in trucking. So everything from booking the loads, managing your tickets, invoicing, tracking, you name it. And you don't have, it's all customized to your, to however your business is. But if you're out there and still doing everything on your, on text messaging or doing everything on clipboards or Excel spreadsheets, man, we have a solution that is much more easier, friendlier to do. And there's a lot of companies that are on the system now. And what's cool about this, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but, you can connect with other companies that you're already doing business with. And that's where this thing is really working, because now instead of having to mail tickets to somebody else, it's all done electronically. The flow of documents, invoices, ticket number. You go through the process, it's all in there. But yeah, we've customized some of these new features because we're actually going to be adding a lot more to it. And anytime you add software, you got to kind of situate it or change it around. I know people don't like change, but we're going to develop a lot more tools on there that's going to make it just easier to use. I think, we're talking about, just ways to even pull up old tickets or old data to retrieve that, to get benchmark freight rates and average freight rates. So ways that you can actually get better pricing on your current freight or loads out there. So there's just a lot more tools just to make it easier to manage your business. So yeah, great tip, Tyler. Again, the tip of this week, we're adding new features to the TMS. Would love for you to check it out. If you're already a subscriber, get a hold of us and we can walk you through that. But if you are interested, again, we won't burn calories on your end. We'll make it super simple. You will not regret taking a look at it.
Yep. Simply go to www.bulktms.com. There's a form there that you can submit to get a personalized demo with one of our guys here, and they'll walk you through everything.
Yep. So, today's podcast, I'm going to bring returning guest Tim Brady on. If you haven't listened to Tim, man, you're going to enjoy this. Tim has been on a number of times, and I am excited to announce that Tim is going to be one of our guest speakers at our first ever bulk freight conference come up this February. So, Tim, man, again, he is a wealth of knowledge.
Yep.
Man, I won't go through his record, but he's been on XM radio. He's published several different books. He's got an online course for trucking companies, and he is going to bring that knowledge to the conference and talk about some of the specific things that we got from you that you wanted to see at this conference. So we are super excited. Tyler, tell us about the conference.
Yeah, so the conference is February 8th and 9th of next year. It's going to be in the heart of the country, Springfield, Missouri. And how you can find out more information and actually buy tickets on there. You can actually go to bulkfreightconference.com, and it has everything there.
And the tickets are honestly really inexpensive.
Yeah.
You're going to get, what are they, $100?
Yeah.
Right now if you purchase them, but you're going to get probably $2,000 in value. I mean, this thing, we are going to surprise you on everything that we got stacked up, and it's going to be social events, guest speakers, roundtable discussions. We actually, at the end, we have a tour through the wonders of wildlife, and you are going to want to see that. It is impressive. I can't even describe how cool it is. But again, February 8th and 9th, right, Tyler? Yep. Here in Springfield, Missouri. Get a hold of us if you want to go. Man, if you're in driving distance, we want to see you. But even if you are coming down, man, it'll be a perfect time to see this area. And man, knock on wood, hopefully the weather's going to be good. Down here, it doesn't get that bad. So if you're up north, man, maybe it'll be an excuse to get down here into warmer weather. So awesome. Well, going in and speaking of that, so Tim Brady's going to come on. Tim, it was, man, one of his prior episodes, he had talked about how when he was driving, how he would schedule out his year to where he had the winter months off. And I never heard that.
Yeah. That's impressive. And he goes into it more in detail, but yeah, there's so many advantages to doing that.
Yeah. I never thought about that. I mean, I don't take much time off myself, but I do know when he first said that, I was like, how do you do that? But why would you want to do that? But again, depending on where you're at, the winter months can be pretty rough, and especially on the trucking side. And sometimes it's better just to stay home than to get on the road. I mean, the accidents that could happen, everything else that you need to do. Now, I know that model doesn't fit everyone, but Tim is going to come on today and give you some tips and some strategies how, if you want to take the winter months off, it is possible, and he is going to walk you through and show you how. So
tune in.
Awesome. Well, with that said, here's my conversation with Tim Brady. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. It's been a while.
It's been a while, but I mean, I go back. We're going now on 5 years, so this has got to be at least number 13, 14, or maybe more with you. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I always enjoy coming back up here and having a conversation with you and having all of your folks, your customers eavesdrops with our conversation. So it's always a good thing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, it was in a prior podcast, but it stuck out to me about when you were running trucks, how you would schedule your year where you had the winter months off. And I never heard that before until you brought that up. And more importantly, how you basically made it work that way, and we're going to go into the details there of what you said, but a lot had to do with, you're avoiding ice and snow on the roads, so you're avoiding the potential of being, crashing, but just the wear and tear on the equipment in the winter months. And I never thought about that. Like, it made perfect sense. Now, I know listeners right now are like, that's impossible. I can't take off the winter months. There's no way my operation would survive, but you did, Tim, and that's why we're going to bring you back on today. We're going to dive into the subject of how potentially you could take off the months, where you probably shouldn't be on the road, and give you more freedom. So let's dive into that, Tim. Talk to us how, when you were running, how you were able to accomplish this.
Well, let me kind of start with a little preempt on this thing. It's all about how do trying to take a planned vacation in trucking for several years was a difficult thing for me to do. All right. Because it seemed like it was either it was too busy, too much revenue potential, or no revenue, but no money in the bank.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And I finally was starting to look at, and I've read several times where there's research that shows Americans, and this is just doesn't apply to trucking companies, owners or owner operators, work more than anyone else in the industrialized world. They take fewer vacation days. We work longer hours. We retire later. Yet several different university studies maintain that taking that time away from the job has both physical and psychological health benefits. People who take vacations have lower stress, less risk of heart attack, a better outlook on life, and more motivation to achieve goals. And this is when I started thinking, man, there's got to be a better way. And so what I started to do initially was try to figure out, okay, how am I going to be able to take a vacation? At some point in time. Well, one of the first things that I sat down and did was I evaluated where my freight was coming from, where my boom times were, where the dead times were, this type of thing. Because within the trucking industry, you really don't want to take a vacation when all of the freight. I mean, it'd be like a grain hauler taking a vacation in September, October, November. It isn't going to happen.
Yep.
Not without an extreme reduction in revenue. So you got to look at first of all, when is the lowest revenue time for your operation, and that's kind of what you're going to shoot for. And with the operation that I ran in, which was primarily in household goods, electronic trade show, that type of thing, your dead time is basically from just before Christmas until about the middle to end of February. And that, because very few people like to move during that time. Trade shows don't ratchet themselves up until mid-February.
Yep.
That type of thing. So it was always a struggle to find freight that paid well enough that you're making the money you need to run the road. You could run the road, but all you're going to do is be churning cash, pretty much paying, what it costs you to do it, but you're not going to be making a huge profit during that point in time. So that's how I made that determination for that period of time to look at, that those were the times I needed to take off. Well, the next process is how do you develop the number of days that you're going to take on the vacation, and how do you come up with the money that you need to cover expenses, both business wise and personal wise, for that time off. And that's kind of what we're going to do here. And the number one step, and I preached this for several years and doing things, is knowing what it costs you to operate your trucking business on a day-to-day basis. And I'm talking about the fixed costs, not so much the operational costs. The operational costs being your fuel, your tires, tolls, maintenance, repairs, all of that stuff that are involved with, if the truck's rolling, that kind of money is being spent. What I'm talking about are the fixed expenses, like the truck payment, the insurances, the cell phone, the business licenses, the license plates, the registrations, and the most important fixed expense, one's own personal salary, are the things that we're looking at here. And so what we want to do is we want to take, the first thing you got to do is know what your annual fixed cost is based on those numbers. And then you divide that number by 260. And you may be sitting there saying, well, there's 365 days in a year.
Yeah.
Why in the world would you do 260? Well, the reason we picked 260 is that's 52 weeks times 5.
Okay.
5 days. All right. Because typically you do not, most truck drivers do not have revenue rolling 365 days a year.
Yep.
It's usually or 7 days a week. It's usually about 5 days a week. And it kind of gives you a cushion in there, because if you run 6th or the 7th day during the year, you're going to have those, but you've already covered those expenses in the first 5. So you're actually creating a better profitability by doing it by 260 days. And that 5 days a week is kind of the number that we're going to be looking at. So that's the first thing we've got to know, is what is it costing us per day, fixed cost wise, to own that truck and to pay our salary so that we've got our the money we need at the house. Number 2 is now we've got to figure out how many days are you going to want to take on vacation. All right. Now, in my example that I was talking about, I'm looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 45 days is the length of a vacation I took. It was usually from about the 20th of December to somewhere around the first week of February.
So you're
Okay.
talking, when you're talking about vacation days, you're talking about 7 days a week. So you're adding your
Right.
weekends.
I'm going to be sitting on my can for 7 days a week.
Yep.
And I really didn't sit on my can because in doing this, I also looked at, what can I come up with for, I'd be bored to death if I sat for 45 days doing nothing.
Right.
Although sometimes that sounds appealing, but it only appeals to me about the first 10 days. So I'm always looking for those I always look for a side hustle, to keep myself busy during the time that I was off. That could add income, but that was on and above everything else I needed.
So you weren't factoring those side hustles into money that you're going to be making. You still,
No,
I mean, that was just above and beyond.
That was just above and beyond. And that's where I started writing the books, coming up with the workshops, that I developed, that I did during, that I did on the road that we talked about before.
Yeah.
Things like that. Is during those 45 days, I would focus on putting all of that stuff together. So when I got back out on the road, I may not be making any money off of those things while I'm on that 45-day break, but I was making the plan for when I was sitting sometime out there on the road during the other 10, 11 months out of the year. So,
Okay.
But the first thing we need to do is we look at how many days off. So we had 45 days. Okay. But on top of that, I needed to add 5 more days on either side of that 45 days. And the reason being is anybody in trucking knows that if you've got to be at a certain place at a certain time, it's very difficult to select your freight that fits that schedule. All right. In other words, if I wanted to be off on the 20th of December, all right, that meant that the last load that I ran, in order to get me to the house, may end up being a deadhead to get me back to the house on the 20th, if that's the date I'm shooting to be at home, or somewhere around the 20th. Or it may require that I take a lower revenue load to get me at least as close to the house as possible.
Yep.
All right. So that's why I add that additional 5 days on the front end of this thing. And then when you're going back out, you got to figure that it's going to take, you got to figure out, okay, where am I going to have to start my load? Well, I'm sitting here in the middle of Northwest Tennessee. Not much household electronics comes out of Northwest Tennessee. So chances are, wherever I'm going to start, I'm going to have to deadhead to that location.
Yep.
Okay. Now, it might have been just down to Memphis. It might have been up to St. Louis, or it could have been all the way down to Dallas, or all the way back up into Massachusetts, where my agency was. So it just depended upon those factors. So that's why I wanted that other 5 days of worth of revenue set aside. So I had to come up with 55 days worth of revenue. All right, not revenue, of fixed costs, in order to be able to take that vacation. And that would also include my salary. All right, in those days. So what I would do then is, I'm going to try not to come up with numbers, because once you start doing numbers when you're doing audio, it confuses everybody. All of a sudden you're trying to. So I'm going to try to just give the math here in terms of this. So what you've got is 55 days that you've got to come up with. All right. So what you're going to do is multiply those 55 days times your fixed daily cost. All right. And that's going to come up with, that's going to increase what your annual fixed cost is going to be, because you're going to take those 55, that number out for those 55 days, that cost, and you're going to add it to your annual cost. And then you're going to go back and divide that by the 260 days we were talking about.
I'm following you. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay. So now we've added that on. Now, when we're putting together our rates, what we need to do is, that becomes an important number that we've got to make along with our profitability, because our profit or our what I call our capitalization figure is even up above that. In other words, you've got your fixed costs now, you've got your capitalization, which is your profit margin, and then you've got your operational costs per mile, and your special cost or your specific load cost, which is like the tolls or labor or that type of thing that you have to have on different loads. And you have to be able to add that all in so that you've got that number. And I've got a whole thing on that. I've actually got a course online that goes through all of this in terms of how to come up with those numbers and how to come up with how to figure out your rate that you need to be charging based on your fixed costs. And it's actually a rate range because it's going to go from what I call break even, which would be without a profit margin, all the way up to making the profit margin that you need to make to grow, sustain your company, plus create your time off bank that you're going to need in order to take that time off. And that's pretty much how I would do that. So that when I took off in December, I had that money set aside in the bank for those entire, for the entire 45 days plus 5 days on either side of that, so that I could sit back. My bills got paid, my salary got paid to the house, that type of thing. The only thing that I was not making during those 45 days was that profit margin. All right. That pretty much gets lost in the mix of things. Unless I've got somebody I can put in that truck, or if I'm owning multiple trucks and I've got drivers and personnel and this type of thing, then what you need to do is figure out how to make sure that you've got your people up to speed so that you're not having to deal with those things, so that you can take time off. Now, normally, to be honest with you, I wouldn't want somebody to have to take over my entire company for 45 days. I might do it for 2 weeks, but I'm not going to do it for 45 days. But the other thing is you got to make sure that when you do that, you also plan so they get to have that scheduled time off where they can do something with their families, where they don't have to think about the company and that type of thing. Again, going back to that research that the universities had done about needing that time off, so that you got less risk of health problems, psychological problems. You end up being healthier. You get more motivation, this type of thing when you get back off of vacation.
I got several questions because I can just hear people on the other side being like, Tim, you don't know my trucking business. It's feast or famine out there. I got to run when it's hot. That may be the winter months, and then when it's not, I can park the truck. I mean, you're talking about specific, months to take off, the winter months. And again, a lot because of the weather and all that. But what would you say to those guys out there that say, man, like this wouldn't fit my trucking operation? Like I have to run when it's hot, and then, when it's slow, I can take time off.
Well, that's kind of what I always looked at with my system. It just so happened that mine worked out well where I could do that 45 days.
Yep.
All right. This isn't saying that everybody ought to take off from the 20th of December to the first week in February by any means. Everybody's business is going to be different. After you've been doing this for a few years in trucking, you're going to know where your feast and famine times are.
Yeah. Good point.
You pretty much know, when loads are hot, loads are paying well and this type of thing. And then you also know when they go down in rates, and then all of a sudden, when you're sitting there trying to struggle to just find, even just break even, or even just revenue to be churning revenue to put on the truck. Well, what do you want to do is when you've got those times, and it may not be something that you can do for 45 days. I mean, I had something else I was doing for those 45 days, obviously, and putting together my workshops and this type of thing that I used to do on the road, or write a book, or, something like that I was doing. Okay. And I was also able to spend time with my family that by no means with the business I was in, I was not able to do. When things were hot in electronic and trade show, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to leave the 15th of March and never see the house until sometime in October.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You could, we would be so busy that you just, and my other thing is I always run. Now, the advantage I had by being, able to own the truck and own the company and this type of thing, I did take each one of my kids out for 4 to 6 weeks during the summer
Oh,
on the
nice.
road with they just one at a time, so that I got to spend time with the kids.
Yeah.
And that gave us some experience. And the thing is again, running the household and this type of thing or electronics, I might end up sitting in Moscone at the uh, marshaling yard at Moscone or up in Chicago or in Boston or something like that for 4 or 5 days, waiting for a show to break so I could reload that show and go somewhere else. Well, guess what? That gave us that time to go and be tourists in that area for that length of time. I think my kids have seen every museum in every one of those cities or been to every amusement park at some point in time, which was one of the benefits of doing what I did. But it wasn't like I was able to be at home. Being at home is still a totally different thing than being on the road. So what I recommend is people to know the ebbs and the flows of their business so that they know when it's slow. And it may be, a 2-week period in November, and it may not even coordinate with a holiday or something like that. Or it might be, there are different times depending on your business. Or it might be rather than 45 days at one time, you take a week here, take a couple of months, and then there's a week here because there's a slow, you've got a slow period in the last quarter of the month, and then you got a slow period in the first quarter of the month, and then you go, crazy from April or May all the way through to September again, and then but you plan so that you've got that money set aside so you can take that deep breath, take that week off, not sit there and struggle with where the bills are going to be paid at the house or how that truck payment's going to be paid or the insurance is going to be paid, just by taking, let's say you want to take, as an example, let's say, okay, I want to take 4 weeks off during the year. All right. At 1 week intervals. All right. Well, you do the same thing. You still, now the trick is maybe you can sit there and say, okay, I'm not going to sit there and plan it so it's an exact date where I have to have the 5 days on the front end and the 5 days on the back end. Although it's probably a good idea to go ahead and put 5 days on the back end for each one of those. But each time you break, I'm going to take off as soon as I get to the house at this particular time. I'm going to run like the Dickens, take that last good paid load, end up at the house, take that week off, and then get back out there on the road. And a lot of times, if you're doing that way, working through, the load board at BulkLoads or the brokers that you folks work through, that they work through, and they call up the broker and said, I'm going to take this week off. Can you plan me a load for next Thursday or next Tuesday or whatever day you're going to come back on the road again and have a load set up? I couldn't very easily do that on on a 45-day stretch, but you can very easily do that on a 7 to 10-day stretch and have that planned ahead. So you already know what you're going to do when you come off of that time off.
Yeah.
But the idea is to still be setting aside the money necessary to make, because you're still going to end up needing that revenue for the when you combine the 4 weeks, there's still going to have to be that revenue to make the monthly payments that you got in terms of truck, telephone, your cell phone, your insurance, your truck payments, and all that stuff. And your salary still got to be paid. So you still need to have that 4 weeks set aside, even though you're going to do it in week by week increments.
Yeah, and I'd be curious how many people actually factor that in, like the vacation, and hey, these days I'm going to set aside these fixed costs of mine. I need to go back and put them into my calculations when figuring rates. And I'm not being skeptical by saying that, but like this is the first I've ever heard of that. as an owner operator, I think, oh, you just try to maximize your profits, and then whatever's left, you kind of make do. But I mean, I love how you're being proactive by like, hey, you have a calculation out.
Well, let me put it this way: it allowed me to retire at 52 by being this proactive.
Wow.
Okay. Now I didn't plan on retiring at 52 because I had an injury that took me out for a year. And to be honest with you, by the time I was healed up and given permission to come back out, I had spent almost 16 months in rehabilitation and that type of thing. And I had developed a whole new means of income.
Yep.
Beyond that. But it allowed me to go ahead, because at that point in time, I went ahead and liquidated my equipment, just so I didn't have to be sitting on top of it, trying to figure out how I was going to be making $10,000 a month in costs being paid out.
Yeah, what I'm saying though, you had a number, and that anyway, I think sometimes we lose sight of that. Here at BulkLoads and Bulk Insurance Group and Smart Freight and all these entities, we put numbers out, and again, it's not to. I mean, you have to know the numbers to know where you're going and like what you're trying to hit, and I love that. I think probably if you're not, more people should do that. Like, hey, what numbers do I need to be hitting a day? Not just, hey, I'm going to just run as hard as I can and pay the bills and whatever's left's left. But like, hey, where do I need to be? Because a lot of times, if you put a number out there, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hit that number. I mean, if it's within reason, but you know where you're going, so you know where you need to be.
Right. And to be honest with you, it doesn't, the biggest challenge one has is getting one's numbers together. And, now I have to
especially in trucking.
I'm a bit of a geeky guy, first of all. I've got a background in education in business management and accounting. So, I'm kind of I've always been a numbers guy to begin with. So, and I have to admit, in fact, that's why I started teaching my Driven for Profits course in the back of my trailer at truck stops back in the 90s, is because the majority of drivers didn't do this. And I knew that I was because I was always listening to both on the household end of things and the electronic end of things, all the way to the general freighters out there and to the people doing refrigerated flatbeds, grain hauling, bulk hauling, all that stuff. Everybody was always talking, no, I got to run, because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. And I'm sitting there going, I'm set up to where, and the way I set myself up, in all honesty, is part of my profit, what I call my capitalization, is that I take that fixed cost and then I take a number, I look at wanting to get 18 months worth of fixed cost set aside and in the bank to be what I call capitalized. All right. So if you're looking at, say 150,000 as an example, as your annual fix, I'm just using that as an odd number.
Yeah.
Times 1.5, that means you got to have $225,000 in the bank to be capitalized. All right. And to be honest with you, what I did was I paid myself at the time, and it might be probably a little bit more now, but I paid myself a base of $40,000 a year salary. That pretty much took care of what I needed at the house.
Yep.
And I didn't get another dime above that until I hit that $225,000 capitalization number. And then once I hit that, then each quarter, if I didn't need the money for anything else, if I wasn't, I had my vacation fund taken care of, all that stuff, anything above that 225,000 in that bank account, I could distribute to myself as profit sharing.
Distribution, yeah, profit. Yeah.
It was a distribution for profit sharing because I had exceeded my capitalization. All right. And towards the end of my thing, I was getting my $40,000 a year salary, but I was making close to $120,000 a year in distribution.
Oh man. 120 distributions plus your $40,000 salary, so you're bumping 160.
I was on 160. And I don't see why anybody, I'm nobody special. It's just that I understood the numbers.
Yeah.
I understood the numbers and knew that, and also you stated earlier, Jared, you stated that if you set a number goal,
Yes.
that's a reason you're going to hit it.
Yep.
Not immediately, but you're going to hit it. And if you knew that as an example, again, I'm going to pull a number out of a hat, but let's say you needed to with profitability, all the numbers that you put in there with your operational cost and everything, you needed $1,500 a day. All right, to meet your numbers.
Yep.
Now, does that mean that you're going to make that $1,500 every single day you're out there for the 5 days a week? Okay. Again, I'm still working on the 5 days a week.
Yep.
All right. Probably not. But the days the more often you do hit it, you're going to becomes a habit to understand how you get to that number.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think even when you're making a decision on finding loads, you already know that number. So, hey, if this load's paying, I'm just using a number, $800 and I'm going to spend most of the day. Okay. Well, this probably isn't going to work. I mean, this is going to put me below the number I need to make.
And to be honest with you, what I would do rather than looking at it by $800 a day, let's say I had this load that did $800 a day, but I went up and I was able to pick up a load that was a 3-day load that paid $1,750 a day that I'm going to pick up and bring back.
Yeah.
Then the numbers together between the 800 and the $1,750 per day for 3 days is going to hit me close to my goal.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not always just turning down that load because it's half of what I need.
Yep.
I'm looking at, okay, what's it going to get me to so I can pick up this load and come back and make up that difference. Yep. There's a lot of times that you'll have that outbound load paying real good money, but your flip side load doesn't pay crap. But what you got to do is calculate it all into the whole as a whole turn to make sure that you're making that $1,500 a day.
Yeah. Tim, I want to turn to one other subject before we close out here. You said it earlier, and I'm kind of glad we went a little bit on this, but just talking about driver health and hours worked. We all know this, and I have to tell so many people that aren't in trucking when we talk about trucking. I had a guy just last week. We were driving down the road. He's like, I'm gonna retire from the fire department, but I'm gonna be looking for another job. And man, I see these truck driving jobs paying $80,000 a year, being a company driver. That sounds awesome. I mean, that's really good. And my response to him was, well, his name's Mark, but Mark, how many hours are you working? I say all this to him. A lot of people don't realize, and I had to educate him. A lot of these drivers, you're working a lot of hours, and I'm not just talking about driving hours. I mean, hours out on the road and hours spent. A lot of people don't realize a lot of our drivers out there, I mean, they're spending, 80 plus hours a week or more out there on the road, working.
Right. They're going through their 70, but they're still doing other stuff that encompasses that 80 or 85 or 90 hours a week.
Yeah. So you do the math and it's like, well, you're really only making, compared to a job you're working 40 hours a week paying 40, it's 40,000. I mean, if you do the math, and I don't want to get into debates on, the costs and all that, but there's a thing I want to more focus on the driver health issue of that and how much is, I guess, how much should drivers be working or when's too much work? Because I think there is something we forget about. I mean, there's a lot of, you talked about the health side effects, the depression and heart disease and obesity and all this with the driver health. And I guess until you said that, I never thought about it that, man, we got to be more cognitive about like allowing more guys to take breaks or take vacations, for their health, mental health. I mean, if you're working and grinding all these years and then you get out of it and you don't live much longer. And I know truckers back home that, they retired and then they're within months gone because they didn't take care of themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's also, you got to figure that it's kind of like taking a machine and running it at full throttle for 15, 20, 30 years. And then all of a sudden you take that machine and you stop it and set it aside. Well, what's it going to do?
Rust.
There's rust.
But
You know,
if you want, and we got
I
five,
mean,
we have 5
I-
minutes
I
left here,
think-
but talk about the driver health and actually taking vacations. Cause I think, man, I hate to say that, but like, I mean, we all want to grind and prove to ourselves how hard we're working, and myself included, man. I want to prove that I'm outworking anybody else around me, or try to. But man, we have to take breaks and vacation. I mean, and it helps us. It makes us even more more productive, I should say, and a better person, better driver out there. What would your response be to that?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, the amount of stress that a driver goes through just through the nature of their job, you've got to have some place that stress pressure is released. And it's got to be where you don't have to think about the damn truck. If you're taking time off and you're sitting there just churning about, oh God, where am I going to get the money for that truck payment, or the insurance is due, or the base plates are due, or,
Where you're taking time off and working on the truck.
If you got to go through that kind of stress, that break isn't doing you a bit of good, because in fact, it's probably doing more damage to you than it would be if you just stayed out there at it. But from the other fact, I did an article several years ago that sleep is probably one of the most important health things that we all have. Good, solid REM sleep, not just take a short nap and get back up going, but actually getting that 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And a lot of people will tell me, I couldn't sleep 8 or 9 hours. Well, that's because you're stressed. Your brain is going to wake you back up because you're stressed. If you're not getting 8 or 9 hours sleep, that's from what I've read, that's a good signal that you're overstressed, that you're overworked, and this type of thing. And you've got to figure out a way to take that time off. I think that's part of what causes the sleep apnea and other problems that we've got out there is drivers aren't getting that restful sleep. And it also makes them less cognizant, less aware of their surroundings and this type of thing, because they're not totally there. And especially if you're stressed out about different things, the more stressed you are, the less attention you're paying to what you're doing on the road. And as any of us know who drives a truck, you got to have 110% attention on what's going on around you in order to be safe out there, especially today. I mean, and especially through the winter, I swear, and I don't have any proof of this, but it seems to me as if the multi-vehicle accidents have increased exponentially over the last 10 or 15 years. I don't remember them being like that when I was out on the road. Now, it could have been that I just wasn't where they were, but because I avoided places like that, like the plague. I mean, I was famous for going from San Francisco to Boston by way of Phoenix, so to avoid the storms. And the interesting thing is I did that several times and still beat the other guys that left with me that went over 80 on the way over. I had more miles in, but I was loaded in 3 days back to the west by the time they got there to get unloaded. So, but you got to think smart. But the other thing is I'm fully in agreement that time off, that is full time off, where you don't have to think about the truck, where you can forget about that truck.
Yep.
Whether it's 3 or 4 days, whether it's a week, whether it's 10 days, or whether it's 45 days, is not as important as it is that you actually get away from the whole thing, where you don't have to think about it for that length of time.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, Tim, we'll close out there on this segment. What a great way to end this. It's Christmas time. Man, we hope and pray those that are out there listening are able to spend valuable time with their family and loved ones in this season. Again, we are in a hustle culture. Man, we're all out there striving, winning, and trying to do the most we can, but we got to take breaks. We got to figure out times where we can set aside this for our own health benefits. But yeah, like I said, just to close out here, I remember you saying that. I mean, this would have been a couple years ago on a show, how you took the winter months off, and man, man, is that even possible? And the answer is yes, and you could do it if you plan accordingly. So Tim, thank you so much for bringing light to that, and Merry Christmas to you and your family.
I say Merry Christmas and have a great holiday season, and we'll check with you guys later.
Man, as always, Tyler, Tim, man, the knowledge that he has about how he used to do things. And it was interesting. I know he had that moving business, so maybe it was a little more applicable to what he can do. I know, again, guys out there, especially in the bulk industry, man, if you're servicing a client, actually your feed consumption goes up in the winter months, so you can't really take off.
Yeah.
But I do know, roadways and some of these industrial jobs, asphalt jobs, some of those slow down. So maybe there is ways that you can manage your time to where you can take that time off.
Yeah, and I like how he said, the vacation benefits. He kind of went into that, and he kind of said some facts that I didn't even think about, but just lowers, stress whenever you take time away from your truck. It lowers your stress. It actually, can lower your risk for a heart attack and, stuff like that.
Can actually be more productive in the long run.
Yeah, exactly.
So cool. Well, speaking of Tim, again, we told you in the earlier that he's going to be at the show. There's a couple key topics, and this was a form that we sent out to you all as guests that with what you wanted to hear or topics that you think are important to today. What are some of those that Tim's going to be talking about?
Yeah, so he's going to be talking about just bulk freight technology in general, which we'll dive deeply into that. But one thing that I'm excited about, which I know a lot of listeners are wanting to talk about, is connecting with new customers on a load board and actually vetting them and how to do that. Just because I know there's a lot of trust issues with connecting with people, over an online platform. So we'll be talking about that. And then another controversial one that will be pretty heated is double brokering.
Oh, yeah. Tim's going to unpack that and really to understand. Because, again, I think people don't understand what double brokering is.
Right.
There's co-brokering, double brokering. I'm not for or against any of this, but he's going to really talk about what it is and, again, how you could either prevent it or use it to your advantage, I guess.
Yeah, so again, to find out more, go to bulkfreightconference.com. There you can purchase tickets, see exactly what we're doing, and what's going to be talked about there.
I always say this. I am a people person. I love seeing clients. Again, we're in an industry where, man, you can talk to somebody for years and never meet them. Last year, I was so humbled going to the Mid-America Truck Show and meeting 300 or 400 of our clients that came by the booth. And I was just honored. I was so exhausted at the end of the day talking and on my feet, but it was so cool. This is another event where we can see you. I know some people, it's hard in your schedule, but man, if you can make it, we want to see you more than anything. And it's not about buying a ticket. It's about coming down and really letting us host you as our guest and serve you as you guys have served us for so long.
Exactly.
So, awesome. Well, before we let you go, one last thing. It is at the end of the year, and you know what that means? New calendar time, BulkLoads calendars.
Yeah, and we're already getting requests for asking if we can go ahead and send some out. We actually do not have them in our hands right now, but we'll be getting them in the next week or so.
They're on the way.
Yeah, if you want one, go ahead and reach out to us. Get your name on the list. They're going to go fast.
Yeah. Well, how many submissions did you have? Truck submissions?
Yeah, we had like 700.
Yeah. So, I can't believe you sorted through all of those.
Yeah,
but Tyler picked some. You are going to be impressed. And like, I think I've said this before, I have one in our kids' room. And again, I look at it every night. For some reason, every time it's right by the door, but I always look at that because this month it's Pete Adsett, and his red truck behind. I think there's a mountain in the background, but just it's so cool. We're so honored to showcase our members on this calendar. If you want one, get a hold of us. You can contact us via email, support@bulkloads.com, or give us a call in here. We'll get you on the list and get one in the mail for you.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, hey, all, Merry Christmas. Thank you very much, and God bless.